Hey, what's up guys? My name is StevieWunderKid and welcome back to another GTA 5 drifting video. We're finally back into the groove with getting some more drifting content out for you guys. Now in this video I thought I'd do a continuation to my original video on some really great budget drift cars in GTA 5. I've had quite a bit of time to test some more cars and I've also gotten a ton of suggestions from you guys, so I thought I'd make a continuation video with 10 more cars that I think are really solid budget drift cars that you could try out for yourselves. So let's get into it. So the first car we're covering here is the Albany, Washington. This car is a really oddball sedan. It's definitely flown under the radar for a lot of players, but if you set this thing up to drift, you'll actually have a pretty good time with this. Although this car does have a little bit more grip and will take a bit more work to keep sideways, it is still pretty rewarding. This car actually handles really well. It's got a really balanced weight distribution and it's on the heavier side, so momentum is on your side and definitely helps initiate and keep drifts going. However, the car is a little bit more underpowered, so you will need to rely a bit more on that mid-drive speed boost to link together longer corners. Overall, the Washington's torque and the mid-drive speed boost, as I said, is pretty good and it's adequate. However, this car is really only usable for those lower to medium speed drifts because of the amount of body roll that it has. It tends to grip up pretty quickly if you fall out of that speed range, but still, if you're linking together those drifts, this car is fairly smooth in terms of handling and holds really good angles, so definitely one you should check out. The next car we've got is the Bravado Buffalo, the OG Buffalo. I know I've covered this car before, but I still think it's a pretty good drift car and definitely worth trying out if you're kind of trying to drift on a budget. So this car tends to be a little bit more tail happy and prone to oversteer like we've seen with the other Buffalo variants like the STX and the Buffalo S. This car doesn't hold a ton of angle, however it is definitely manageable and forgivable, especially if you know how to use the brakes, so that way you can control your angle in high angle drifts. In addition to that, this car has really good power delivery, although it's actually a little bit hard to hear when to engage the mid-drive speed boost because this car's engine note is actually really quiet. Once you get used to it, it's actually very easy to fall into a groove with re-engaging that boost for those longer and faster drifts. Definitely a little bit more powerful than the Washington, but still feels pretty similar in terms of handling, so definitely another good car for you to check out. Next up, we have the Cheval Fugitive. This is overall a really balanced drift car that definitely gives me muscle car vibes. This car is decently heavy and it's got a lot of body roll, but handling is overall pretty smooth. It holds good angle and also has a fairly strong mid-drive speed boost. However, as I said, it feels a lot like a muscle car, so it's got the torque, but it is just generally pretty laggy and slow to engage that boost. However, if you use that to your advantage and you get used to using that boost and consistently repeating it, and you can link this thing through decently long corners with ease. You will have to fight the body roll and grip a little bit to keep the car sideways, but still overall pretty smooth car that's also worth checking out if you pull it right off the street. And next up we have the Class A Stallion or the Burger Shot Stallion. Now in the clips I'm showing the Burger Shot Stallion. I personally think the Burger Shot Stallion feels a little bit better in terms of the handling as well as the power. In my opinion, this car has a little bit more power than the ordinary Stallion. In addition to that, it's a little bit stiffer, so it generally feels a little bit easier to initiate and get sliding easily. However, either variant of this car will serve you pretty well if you want to try to drift it. The Burger Shot Stallion that I'm drifting here has a really good and very responsive mid-drive speed boost, extremely easy to hit, and it will keep you going through pretty much any slide you throw at it, really. It'll hold out really long slides with a fair amount of ease. However, this car, if you have the Burger Shot Stallion variant, which is the race car, obviously is a little bit more stiff, so it's very twitchy and snappy and very tail happy, so it's very easy to kind of oversteer with this thing and spin out. In that regard, I think the Stallion might handle slightly better the original Stallion because it has a little bit more body roll, but generally this car is very tail happy regardless of the variant that you're using. Despite this though, the fact that it has really good power and holds pretty decent amount of angle, keeps it stable and forgiving in those high angle drifts, so definitely obscure car that's definitely worth checking out for drifting if you want to give it a go. And next up we have a really weird drift car, the Dundreary Regina. Yes, this really slow and sluggish and boring looking wagon is actually an unironically very smooth drift car. It was a huge surprise to me. People kept suggesting it to me, you gotta give this thing a shot, Steve, and I never believed anybody, and then I tried it and I was so blown away by this thing. It was crazy. But anyway, the Dundreary Regina, although this car is very slow and sluggish, it does offer a pretty decent mid-drive speed boost that helps keep the revs up for those longer drifts. Obviously, this car won't hold out really high speed slides like a Banshee 900R, but surprisingly enough will keep together, longer slides with ease. Obviously nothing super high speed as I said, but still it is pretty adequate surprisingly enough. This car has a longer wheelbase and it's also pretty heavy, so it's easy to get and keep sideways in the first place. It also has a very balanced weight distribution, meaning that it handles really good. However, because of the slippery tune that we're putting on this car just to get it sideways in the first place, it is a bit more prone to oversteer, so just keep that in mind fine, but once you learn how to control this thing, it's got decent power, as I said, and it can hold out pretty good drifts. Very surprising car, and you'll definitely get a wow factor for giving this thing a shot for yourselves. Next up, we have the Impante Duke of Death. This car is a really oddball car, but once you give this thing a shot, it's got lots of power, and you'll realize that it's got a really consistent and strong mid-drive speed boost. However, one of the fatal flaws of this car is that you cannot equip low grip tires, and you cannot stance this car. It's an armored vehicle, you can't take it into the LS car meet, nor can you stance it because it has bulletproof tires that you cannot remove, which kind of sucks. So because of those factors, combined with the fact that this car has such a soft suspension, means that it is very, very grippy, so you will have to put in a ton of steering effort to keep this car sideways, while of course keeping the power on. The consistent mid-drive speed boost and lots of power that it does have is really great for getting the car sideways in the first place, but again, you will have to rely on that speed boost to kind of carry it through a corner in its entirety. You can drift up to decently high speeds with this thing, again, if you learn to kind of fight the body roll that the car has, but once you go slightly too fast, the car will grip up very quickly and kill your drift. So it's definitely meant for more skilled drifters or people who want to put in the effort to fight this car's body roll, but if you get into a groove with this thing, especially in those lower to medium speed slides, this car is actually pretty good. Next up, we have the Lampadati Felon. This is another really good and underrated sedan that reminds me a lot of the Cheval Fugitive that we covered before. This car offers really smooth handling, but generally feels a little bit more twitchy and grippy, and it's got more of a tendency to straighten out if you're not aggressive enough with your steering inputs though. Generally, the Felon makes really good power. It's got a strong mid-drive speed boost that will carry you through decently long corners, but just keep in mind that the car will tend to grip up, so you will need to keep on that power, and you will need to use quite a bit of the handbrake in addition to aggressive steering inputs to keep this thing sideways, but still a really underrated car that I'd definitely check out if you want to try to drift it. Next up, we have the hateful machine, the Ocelot F620. Although some people in the racing community don't quite like this car that much, I personally enjoy it for drifting. The F620's got lots of power with a decently strong mid-drive speed boost. Although this boost really isn't the easiest to hit because of the overall grip that the car has, it still is, when you fall into a groove with it, pretty rewarding. Now, the F620 has a front bias center of mass, meaning that the rear tires don't have a lot of grip, and if you slightly spin out or you slightly lose a little bit of control in this thing, you'll pretty much fully spin out very easily. The car is very snappy and very tail happy, so you just need to keep that in mind, and you need to keep very careful with your steering inputs. You can easily initiate drifts, but keeping the car going through them will be the main battle. This car is, as I said, pretty powerful and pretty good as a drift car. It is a bit finicky though, but if you want to give this thing a shot, it's definitely worth it. Next up, we have the Vapid Stanier, another really unassuming car, but surprisingly really good for drifting. This thing is extremely smooth. Although the Stanier is a little bit heavy, it's got a really balanced weight distribution, meaning that it has really good handling and also holds a lot of angle mid-drift. It's not the most powerful car in the world, but does have an adequate mid-drive speed boost that helps keep it sideways through pretty long and high-speed drifts. The Stanier does have a tendency to grip up at higher speed drifts, but if you're keeping it at that lower to medium speed drift, it's still really great and easy to use, and as I said, surprisingly smooth. Definitely give this thing a go, you won't be disappointed. And last but not least, we have the GOAT of drifting that has been one of the most consistent drift cars in the game ever since it released, the Willard Faction. This car, as I said, is extremely consistent. This car holds a ton of angle and the weight is balanced enough to keep it super smooth when you're drifting. This car makes a decent amount of power and torque. It is a muscle car, obviously, so it's very good in terms of power, and it has a controllable mid-drive speed boost to hold out fairly long and fast drifts. However, the main fatal flaw of this car, although it handles great, it holds really good angle, it's got great power, all that, it's super cheap obviously, but its fatal flaw is that it's really sensitive to curbs and bumps in the road. So if you're using this thing for like street drifting, just keep in mind that you can't really bump into a curb, otherwise this car will fully spin out. It's very sensitive to those, so just keep that in mind. Don't hit anything with this car, or don't go over any bumps, and you should stay pretty smooth and pretty good to go in terms of drifting. If you want to upgrade to the Faction Custom variant, so the lowrider variant, then you'll pretty much eliminate that sensitivity to curbs, but if you're trying to ball on a budget and keep this thing cheap, then just leave it without the upgrade, and as long as you be careful with it, you'll be just fine, and you'll have a lot of fun drifting with this thing. But yeah, boys, that will conclude my list of 10 more really awesome budget drift cars for you guys to test out for yourselves. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you found it helpful, feel free to leave a like, as well as any other suggestions for drift cars you'd like me to test out in GTA 5 down below in the comments. As always, your feedback is greatly appreciated. Thank you guys so much for watching and supporting my content, and I will see you guys in the next video.